Hello, welcome to another event of SUGHYD where I, Yamini, and Vishal Kera co-host this event. And today we have our speakers Kiran Patil, who is going to talk on about mastering exam cloud or architecture and development process. And for whom who don't know Kiran Patil, he's a 12-time Sitecore MVP, and I think he'll better introduce himself. So with no further ado, I'll give it to Kiran Patil. Thank you.
Thanks, Yamini. Thanks, Vishal, for hosting the session. I know how much time and effort it takes, so thank you for doing this. And thanks everyone for joining the session. I know there have been linked holidays, and if you're on holiday and join the session, thank you for doing that. We'll try to do make sure that whatever 60 minutes you're going to spend together, you get some value out of it at end of the session. So today's topic is XM Cloud architecture and development process. The last session, which not sure you attended, but in the last session, we discussed about the XM Cloud basics, which is core fundamentals of XM Cloud, why XM Cloud, what are the core features of XM Cloud. We did that session last week at Sitecore Group India. They already uploaded the recording. So in case you didn't, you can go through the recording. The link is here, or you can also go to Sitecore Group India's YouTube channel, and then you can find out the session there. But that is a core session. And then today we are going to focus on XM Cloud architecture and development process. And the next two sessions are about personalization, analytics, and forms in XM Cloud. And then XM Cloud deployment using Vercel or Netlify. We'll be discussing that 30th of August. So in case you're interested for those topics, feel free to join. That's a part of the 4 session series which I'm doing in the month of August. To quickly introduce myself, my name is Kiran Patil, working as a group technology director at Horizontal Minneapolis office. So it's too early for me to start my day, but happy to do it for you guys. I've been working at Horizontal for 11 years. I was working from the India office earlier, and then I moved Minneapolis 5 years back. I'm in Sitecore industry since 2009, and then I have been Sitecore technology MVP for 12 years in a row. I was the first Sitecore MVP from India, and there was no any MVP, so it was good to put the Indian flag there. And I blog on my blog, which is sitecorebasics.wordpress.com. I also been Covio MVP, and I have been like first Sitecore CDP and XM Cloud certified developer in the world because I got an initial exploration and learned it, and also created some global boot camps for the global teams, and then also got a chance to appear for the certification. So now let's delve in the topic. So architecture and development process. In the last session, we discussed about this architecture. I assume that few of you might have not attended. So let's go through that once again. So when you provision your XM Cloud instance, you get this CM instance, which is hosted by Sitecore. Uh, Build and deployment services are also hosted by Sitecore on the Sitecore Cloud. And then there is an editing host, which is also hosted by Sitecore. And then on top of that, you get all these CLIs and pages and all those tools pre-built, and also forms and analytics and personalization also. Once you publish your content, it goes to Edge, and then you can use your head, which can be a Next.js, Vercel, or might be you use Amplify or you use your own custom hosting. But basically, Next.js, Vue, or React, or whatever your company is expert with, or your client would like to have you. The Experience Edge, basically it's all published content hosted by Sitecore all over the world using the CDN network, and then you can fetch the content using the GraphQL. We'll discuss more about it in the upcoming slides. And then whenever you have any custom code, you can like C# .NET code, which will be very rare in XM Cloud world, which Sitecore also recommends that you will be deploying that on XM Cloud instance, and all your JSON components, definitions, and everything will be on your XM Cloud, and that will be published to Edge. And then Sitecore CLI can be used for a lot of automations, mainly for DevOps activities. We'll see that. And as a developer, you'll be using your Docker instance in local. Your code is hosted on either GitHub or Azure DevOps. You'll be running your Docker instance, configuring your templates and JSON renderings, and then verifying in local, and then pushing it to XM Cloud CM instance. So that's an architecture. And for questions, feel free to drop into the channel, or if you would like to raise the hand, I would take some help from Vishal and Yamini for helping me out. But feel free, and at the same time, you can also go on mute and also ask the question. And we also have I would like to reserve like last 15 minutes for questions as well. So now let's go one level deep into the architecture. And this diagram is shared by Rudwen Failure at SUGHYD Europe. So the credit goes to him. This is not my diagram. But this diagram shows sort of important things. So as a developer, if you have XM customizations, which mainly will be done using .NET framework, because XM is still hosted on .NET framework, not .NET Core, the site cores. So you'll be using .NET framework, and then your front end is Next.js. You commit that code. You can also use the XM Cloud Deploy app, which is a UI-based app, which you will see, and then also you can use the CLI. You can also use the build and deployment services, which is kind of a core abstracted version of the build and deployment services by Sitecore, which deploys on Sitecore CM. Your Sitecore pages can be used by content authors to edit the content. And as soon as you publish the content, it is available on the Experience Edge. And then you can use your static hosting, which is Vercel, Netlify, Azure, or Amplify, where site visitors will be visiting, fetching the data from here or looking at the pages from here. And then from Git, you can also push to your front end application. So if you only have front end change, not a back end change, you can directly deploy to front end application, and then it will be visible. No need to deploy on CM. So that's the whole architecture, how this whole XM Cloud will work in detail. So now let's talk about the development process. So the first things first, the local development. So for the local development, when you set up your XM Cloud instance, set using the Sitecore starter kit, it will behind the scenes clone the Sitecore starter kit repo to your repo, which you provide during the configuration step. And then it is basically a Docker repository. So you clone that repo, and then you run the up command. So when you run the up command, basically your full stack development environment will be running. So basically you have the backend, basically core site core system running. And then if you go to this SXS starter directory, you can run this npm run start connected, which will be starting your front end in local, which I always recommend because once you make some changes, it's good to verify in local using this npm run start connected command, and it will run the Node.js server in your local, and then it will be serving the Next.js. Now, when you start the Docker instance, right, in local, it starts the XM, CM, Solar, and all those rendering host, editing host in your local instance, local laptop. So make sure that you have enough space, the disk space and memory space in your on your laptop, and then you will be committing the code and then using your local container for local development. Now, there are a lot of philosophies which people follow. Like one philosophy is backend first, another philosophy is front end first. Uh, in my experience, I have always benefited from using backend first because backend will create the JSON rendering, create the data model or the template, and provide that output to the front end friend, and then they can wrap up some Next.js code. At the same time, there are a few backends are also learning Next.js now, so you can also do some kind of a initial Next.js code using Sitecore.js SDK, using the JSON output using GraphQL. And then for styling and more complicated JavaScript, you can give it to your front end friend. So it all depends on the skill set you have in the team. But the experience what I have seen is backend first is always good, mainly when you start your JSON rendering and create the model. So front end can at least leverage that. And then if you're a full stack, then you can do both. Now, there are also mechanism where you no need to set up your front end like local environment, like you don't need local development. What people are recommending is where especially your front end phones, right? Like mostly front end folks will be using Mac, and these are kind of in Windows based Docker images. So it won't work on Mac unless you do some workarounds. So the best way to do that is where you just run the local front end instance and then connect to your uh, experience edge instance, either a preview API or delivery API, and then work from there. So you don't need to run your local Sitecore instance, just directly connect to there, and then whatever modification you need to do, you directly do on your higher environment. Like when I say higher, like the XM Cloud hosted environment, like XM Cloud, you can have multiple environments, dev, QA, production. So you can have like dev environment being used for development. So you can explore that. That's also an interesting mechanism because that will save a lot of your time running local because mostly, as I mentioned, you'll not be modifying this XM customizations. Mostly you'll be creating JSON renderings and then integrating with your Next.js rendering. Now, when you start a project, in the last session we discussed about the XM Cloud Starter Kit, but this is the XM Cloud Starter Kit, which is being used for creating your own XM Cloud environment. This is recommended by Sitecore. And once you set up that, it has the starter foundation code for you. So it has the backend folder, the front end folder, very nicely organized, the serialization folder. So it helps you quick start your site code development. But you might be wondering that, hey, if let's say I start my project in August and Sitecore is making the changes in their repository in November, how can I make sure that I merge that into my project, which is already started in August? So that for that, Sitecore has this document, which I would recommend you to go. Basically, there are some steps provided where you can sync your local pre-created starter kit foundation with the base foundation and download some data and make sure that they are in sync because Sitecore team keeps updating this repo. And then there's also nice recording by Sebastian, which I strongly recommend. And you will find the link from this particular uh, document. Now, when you start your instance, right, make sure that you do up.ps1 because Docker, to run a Docker, I feel like you need some luck, but at the same time, you need some best practices as well. Make sure that you run up.ps1 when you start the Docker instance. And before you do Hibernate or shutdown based on whatever you like, because there are few people who do Hibernate, you do down.ps1. If you don't do down.ps1, at times it creates a lot of challenges, and then you have to do a lot of cleanup activities to get back to a good state. So when you start your work, do up.ps1. When you are done with your work, just do down.ps1. That will save a lot of your time. Now let's look at this Sitecore starter kit structure. So when you download that or clone that repo in your local, right, you will be seeing this directory structure. A lot of folders are here. Basically, all this will contain some configuration in the backend stuff. Stuff. If you are interested, you can explore those. Like some token keys are in this user.json. But main thing where you will be working is SRC folder. In the SRC folder, when you expand, you'll find items where basically all your serialized items are there, and it uses sitecode serialization. So get familiar with that if you have not explored that. It's a kind of a simpler version of TDS. The platform folder is basically for C# code. Let's say if you write content resolver, that will be written here, and then from here you can deploy. And then the last folder, which is SXC starter, that's mainly your front end Next.js code and or React code will be residing here. So that's set. And then there are two files. One is env file. This contains a lot of environment variables for your whole instance. And then you'll also find this environment dot local, which is basically for your SXC starter folder. We'll see that in live demo as well, but just giving you high level idea. Now, if you look at your Docker folder, right, the Docker folder basically contains all the source required to run your Docker instance. So it has a build folder. The data folder is where your data is being stored, like CM, Solar SQL, and then deploy platform is basically when you have any C# code change, it will be basically deployed here. And then from here, there is an watcher which is running, which is an initial internal task. It will copy it to your Docker instance. And then traffic is mainly used for networking and traffic management within Docker environment. And then this Docker Compose, how it is, it has all the definition which you need. When you start your Docker instances, the entry point is the main thing which gets called. And then you can see that this development.ps1, it has that all those things which you need to run your local environment. And mainly the watcher is the key thing. So when you deploy your local stuff here, there is a watcher which is part of this and it deploys things. But in case you are facing some challenges or you want to do something, you can come to this file and modify things here. But take a backup before you do that. Now, as I mentioned, deploying to local container, there is a watcher which runs, and then you can, the watcher scripts runs, and then you are basically working in your virtual environment, Docker, and then your local instance is different. There's a watch script which moves or copies the folder or files from here to here. There is a publish profile already created, so you can publish it from your local Visual Studio, and then it will copy it to your deploy platform and it will copy it to your CM instance. So that's how this local deployment works for C# code. Deploying to cloud, which we'll not discuss much in this session, but there is session 4 where we'll discuss how you can deploy your code to cloud, basically uh, Vercel or Notify. I'm going to show two demos, Vercel and Notify demos as part of the session 4. But basically, whatever code you have, how can you deploy that on XM Cloud as part of the session? Let's talk about the component development process, how to develop a component. So to develop a component, and this is a kind of quick steps, there is a also a good document from Sitecore where you create your SXA module and then create all these things. But I'm just giving you the basic steps. So the first step you need to do is it's a 4-step process. The first step is create JSON rendering item where you configure these additional things, which I will show you. And then you create a data template items, same thing which we have been doing since long time, no change. And then create your rendering, which is your, now this will be Next.js rendering you have to create by hand. So you create your JSON rendering, the definition item, and then the same name, wherever you provide the component name, for example, you provide a component name XYZ, your rendering name also has to be xyz.tsx because it maps from the name. And then you look into your preview into your local instance, commit the code, and then you deploy on your uh, XM Cloud instance. So that's the 4-step process, and I'll show you all the steps as part of the live demo. Um, Once your code is ready, you are happy with what things are working in local, then you can commit your changes. For committing your changes, you will need a Sitecore CLI. In case you are new to Sitecore CLI, it's a CLI provided by Sitecore, which does a lot of things. And one of that is serialization, which we are going to use. But let's say if you want to do publishing, for you want to automate publishing, you can use publishing module as well, or plugin. You can also do indexing, item resourcing thing, and then a lot of other things. The key files are like the JSON files where you configure your uh, item path. So the first thing what you need to do is you need to log into your uh, Sitecore Cloud, and then you do a project list. You look into your environment, and then you have to do some configuration to basically get the code or serialize items from your deployed XM Cloud instance. Like for example, in this example, dev instance, which is deployed on XM Cloud, and then you can push into local as well. So you can serialize the local, and then you can commit that stuff, and then that will be deployed. So you can see my files are being serialized, and I'm now committing those changes. And then on the front end, you are basically writing your code in Next.js directly, and then committing the Next.js files, the DSX files. Now, when you run your local Docker instance, you don't have Sitecore pages working from local. So because Sitecore pages is a SaaS based application, So you cannot run that in local. So the solution for that is you can add this local storage key, which is XM Cloud, local XM Cloud URL, and then you can provide your XM Cloud instance URL, and then your local will be connected to Sitecore pages hosted on cloud, but fetching all your local data. And then there are some configurations needs to be there in env file, which are there, but still verify those. If you don't want to do all these steps, there is a Chrome extension available. You can use that, and I'll show the live demo as well. So don't worry if you don't understand this. But basically, if you want to verify your component on Sitecore pages before you commit, or let's say if you're facing some issue on Sitecore pages after deployment and you want to verify that in local, you can use this mechanism to verify that. Now connect your local with Experience Edge. As I mentioned, your front-end developers might not need uh, the whole Sitecore instance running in local, or they are running using Mac and cannot do that. So in that mechanism, what you can do is you can change your local environment local file in SXS Starter, where you change the GraphQL endpoint to the delivery endpoint or preview endpoint. And what that means, we'll talk about that. And then you can also change the website, basic website name, and then the local instance when you start the SXS starter npm run start connected, it will fetch the data from your preview or delivery API based on the configurations. And then if you are facing some issue or if you would like to debug something, you can also debug, change this environment variable debug Sitecore JSS. It will give you more detailed logs. Uh, and then if you want, you can also you do this in code space, which is GitHub's offering, where you even don't need a local environment. You can do this in cloud. So you can read more about that in this blog. I'll not go in detail, but GitHub code space is a thing which you can use if your front-end developer doesn't have environment as well, like they can leverage that. Or they're working on multiple environments or projects, they can do that. The very key aspect of XM Cloud is Experience Edge, because in the non-XM Cloud world, we used to have, if you recall, content delivery servers from where we used to fetch the content, but now there are no content delivery servers. So all your data is published on Experience Edge, which looks like this. Basically, Experience Edge is kind of Sitecore's hosted CDN network where all your published content is deployed across the globe. And then you can fetch those via GraphQL and create your output. The benefit of Experience Edge is omni-channel integration. If you have multiple channels consuming the same content, you can leverage Experience Edge. And once you publish the change from your XM Cloud, it will be visible everywhere. And then when the publishing happens with Experience Edge, it does a lot of backend things, and then it will publish. So there are multiple APIs available in Experience Edge. The preview API is the first one. But basically, when you have your non-published content, right? Let's say on your SimCloud instance, if you are doing something in editing mode, if you would like to explore that, you can use that preview API. Or in your local XM Cloud instance, there is no Experience Edge delivery API, right? You cannot publish it. So in that scenario, you can also leverage your preview API to fetch the preview API. This is an endpoint. Uh, and if you like to have a very developer friendly IDE, you can just add this graph/UI. And this is a documentation which provides more detailed steps, which we will see in a demo. The delivery API is basically when you publish your content and you want to do query that, you can use this edge.sitecorecloud.io endpoint, or you can also do the IDE. This is mainly used for your real world production where you have the preview API or delivery API where published content will be there and you connect to your Vercel or Netlify instance or Amplify instance. The token API is basically creating the tokens, very straightforward. Admin API is basically administrating your edge instance. So let's say if you notice that your edge caching is not getting cleared, if you want to clear the edge caching or you want to modify those, you can use the admin API. Sector authoring and management GraphQL API is basically used for authoring and management. For example, you want to do a indexing or data cleanup, you'll be using the management GraphQL APIs via GraphQL. Or if you want to do some kind of an authoring activities, like for example, create item, delete item. For example, the best real world example is you are creating a process where you are fetching the data from your PIM system and then creating those items in Sitecore, right? You Sitecore doesn't recommend using scheduled tasks for that. You can have your, let's say, Azure functions, and then Azure functions will be reading the data from PIM and then writing into your authoring, writing into your XM Cloud instance via authoring API. So basically, they are also known as mutations, but they are same. Like when someone says hardcore authoring or mutations, I think those kind of an interconnected topics. And it also has playground where you can do using ID. By default, it is disabled, which makes sense for safety reason. So you can enable that using environment variable. We'll discuss that when we see a live demo. Now, you've been hearing GraphQL a lot, so let's talk about it. So GraphQL is basically created by Facebook, and then they did it open source, so community can use it. So everyone has been using it for a long time. Sitecore added GraphQL support in 2018 with JSS. The benefits of GraphQL is precise data retrieval because you can fetch only the data you need and reduces the access data transfer. Optimize query. The person who is writing the query, they can optimize the query and then they can do a lot of things. Because if you have the REST API, the response, the endpoint and response is fixed, but here you can modify the uh, output based on the queries. Error reduction, as it is using strongly typed schemas, you can hash the cache errors early. Developer friendly, it provides some IDE, which I discussed, where you can write the queries and verify. And this diagram shows how GraphQL works behind the scenes. And the diagram is coming from this particular blog, Ramit. And then this is a GraphQL cookbook run by community, which provides all the good examples. Like if you want header, footer, navigation, all those examples are there. So you can use these GraphQL examples to start learning, and then might be contribute to that in the longer run. Awesome, a lot of theory, which is boring part, I know, but we have to go through that. Now let's start the demo. So we'll go through one by one and then make sure that you understand each piece of it. So as I mentioned, once you have your repository cloned, you can start your Docker instance. So you can open your terminal, you can open terminal, whatever, a PowerShell, whatever you use it. So you can go to your directory, which is this one. Uh, and then if you look at it, it has all those files which are coming from the GitHub repo. And then you can run the, okay, if you if you look at this, it has up.ps1, which basically you start and then down.ps1. You need to run the init.ps1 first time, and the steps you will find in the README file. Uh, but once you run that, you just run the up.ps1. Uh, I already done that, so my local Docker instance is already running, so we save some time. Um, Session was expired. So once you, and then there are a few more commands I'd like to show before I showed you the Docker instance. Now you can also connect your Sitecore Cloud instance by this command, .NET Sitecore Cloud login. Once you do that first time, it will open the browser window where it will ask you to authenticate. And then once you do that, then what you can do is you can run the command like this project list. Basically, this command will fetch all my instances. So this is my training instance, which I'm using right now. It provides the project ID, it's like 6IFE. And if I go back to my XM Cloud instance, I can verify that that's the same ID which I'm. So in case you want project ID and everything, you can use that. And once you have the project ID, right, what you can do is you can list the environment by project ID. So here like this. So once you provide the list, You can see how many environments are there. So here I just have training 08 dev environment, which has been created. So there are multiple commands. I'll not go in detail, but the gist of the discussion is whatever you can do from the UI, exactly same thing you should be able to do it from the CLI. That's the main gist of the whole discussion. So I'll not go through all the commands as I mentioned. And then for the serialization, what you can do is, so once serialization is configured, you can do pull, push. Uh, you can also pull from your dev environment, which is higher environment, and then you can push to your local environment, which is your local environment, just to sync some data. And if you want to verify your serialization has some changes or not, you can just run this SCR info, which provides you all this information, the placeholder settings and everything. Now we'll go to the next thing, which is your repo. So this is the repo. I opened that in Visual Studio Code. I think you need to get used to Visual Studio Code because a lot of time you'll be spending here. In case you don't like to run this terminal from here, you can also start a new terminal from here. And it provides you the integrated environment, so you don't need to switch windows. I usually do that when I'm working on things, and it provides the same experience what you have there. So start getting used to VS Code for your day-to-day work, and then you can do a lot of things from here, which I'll not do. Um, Now, these are my directory. As I mentioned, when you connect your instance, right, it creates user JSON where you have your environment and tokens and everything there. So this SRC directory has like items serialized. So I have this item serialized. My platform folder contains the C# code, and this is where it contains all the components and TSX files here. And then, as I mentioned, the two important files, the root level INV file contains a lot of environment variables which you need. Like we are talking about the Sitecore pages and everything. So it is here. And then there are there is an env local file at SXS starter folder, which is basically for your Node.js environment. So use that and don't make any changes to this env file. Always copy it and create env.local. So, and then make sure that you don't commit that file, else it will overwrite everyone other's changes from the local for the local environment point of view. So that's about the configuration. Now I have my local instance running as I mentioned. Um, So I will just show you the local instance. Now in this local instance, I have pulled the content from my cloud instance already. And then before you can even do a preview in local, right? You need to do some configurations. The main configuration here is in your system services, you need to fetch and configure your local rendering host. So when Experience Editor connects to it, it fetches from there, right? So that's one-time configuration you have to do, so you can use the Experience Editor in local. And while this is loading, I'll also like to show one more thing which I should have shown when I was here. So here, as I mentioned, you can also run your this environment, which is your front-end environment, by your front-end developer. You can change this GraphQL endpoint to a preview or delivery API, and then your front-end developer no need to run the Sitecore instance. They just run this particular SXS starter node instance, and then they'll be good to go, provided that you deploy all your definitions of JSON rendering on your dev or QA or whatever environment you are using. So that's that. Um, the second thing would like to show you guys is the preview API and delivery APIs, which I have been talking. For that, I have to move this Teams screen, which you cannot see, but I see. Um, so this is my preview API. Basically, when I have my local or whatever XM Cloud hosted CM instance with this URL with ID, that's my preview API, considered as preview API. Basically, all the content which is not yet published, will be visible here. So I can query this. So I'm querying my website which I created, and then this is giving me the GraphQL output. If you want to explore the schema and get familiar with it, you can use this schema. You can also download the schema here. The main thing here is you have to make sure that you provide the SC API key, which is your uh, environment specific. How to fetch that? You can fetch that from click on the training environment, your dev environment, right? And then when you go to environment details, from here, you can click on this preview GraphQL ID, launch ID, and live GraphQL ID, launch ID, and then you can copy the tokens from here. So there are tokens available. And if you want to do authoring GraphQL ID, you can click from here. So it's very straightforward and you don't need to remember the URLs. Just click on this thing. Make sure that you remember this environment details thing, and then you can copy paste those IDs from there. So I've already done that to save time. And this is my delivery API, which is basically Experience Edge. And here I'm running the same query and should be getting the same output. Basically, this provides all the placeholder settings, components, and all the output. So you can connect and do the front end rendering. These are good documentations by Sitecore, which I recommend you to go through. Um, this one is for setting up your preview and delivery API, the steps required, the headers information I mentioned, right? The preview ground, and then an example query. The delivery API, basically, as I mentioned, the published content will be here. And then there are some token APIs for creating tokens and then getting the tokens. And then admin APIs for cache clearing, deleting content, get settings. You can use the admin API. And then you can also use the authoring and management API where you can enable this. The most important thing is you have to make sure that your environment variable, which is GraphQL expose playground, is a true. It won't work. So how can you change that? You can come to your environment and then click on the variables, and then this expose playground, the value is default false, make it true. How can you do that? Click here, edit, and change it to true. And once you do that, you have to redeploy your environment so it will take in effect. I have not done that because I didn't wanted to expose that right now, but you can play with that. Once you do that, right, what you can do is as part of authoring operations, right, you can, let's say this is a query to create an item. So you write mutation, create item, the template, parent, the fields you want to populate, and then you can do that. The result is like this. You can delete an item, you can create template item, update fields, and upload media as well. So in case you are writing some migration routine, you are fetching some data from somewhere else and creating the media migration or content migration. This is super helpful to do that. And then query examples for management processes. Basically, as I mentioned, you want to trigger indexing, right? At times for Azure DevOps, you want to trigger indexing after publishing or is done. You can use this mutation of rebuild indexes, part of management operations. Check a job status, and then a lot of other things are there, which I'll not spend time. I've created a simple table where you can click on all those things. Now my experience editor is loaded while we are talking about that. So this is my local version and local experience editor is working here. For that, I had to do one configuration, which is very important. So I'm just showing you that. In the services, you have to create a rendering host. The default will be there. You have to create local. In that, you have to provide this rendering 3000. This is basically your rendering host running in your local. So provide all that things here. And once you do that, you have to come here inside grouping. And then here in the local, make sure that you select the predefined application rendering host to local, which is default. Once you do that, you can start looking at your stuff in Experience Editor. But now let's talk about how to l- preview this in pages, right? So I'll access my pages instance. So this is my XMC basic site on my dev environment. So look into the URL. This is not local. This is right. And then this is my demo B page, which is on cloud. So I'm writing it on cloud, and I can also write SUG Hyderabad, right? And it is getting saved now. I have installed the plugin, but I'll just connect to it. I'll copy paste this URL. Once I do that, now this will refresh the screen and my local data will be fetched. So you will see that it is now changed to demo be local instead of cloud. And now my local content is being served through Sitecore pages. Once I'm done with my task, what I can do is I can disconnect. And once I do disconnect, now you'll see the cloud content coming back. So this is my cloud content. So this is how you can connect your site local instance to Sitecore pages using this plugin. But this plugin behind the scenes adds that entry in your local storage. So you can also do that. So it's up to you. I like this plugin because it's simple, straightforward. Now let's talk about the component creation steps, right? So the first step, what you need to do when you create a component, you need to have a template. So we created a component. I think template, we are going to leverage the default one. So let me close all these things. Okay. So close the tab as well. So get some more space. I can zoom in. Okay. So layout, renderings, project, XMC basics. This is my component and I created this as JSON rendering. Nothing fancy there. Right, you can create JSON rendering from here. And once you do that here, component name is very important as I mentioned. And then these two properties, isotro data source rendering, and then this rendering placeholder is important. So set that. And then parameter template. We're just going to leverage the rich text for now. And then data source location, you can write this query from data source location. And data source template is basically I'm going to use the by default out of the box text, the template which is available. And then yeah, once you do that, I think that's it from here. And then when you go here in your one more step needs to be done is in the presentation available renderings. Make sure that your component is added here. And then if you go back to your toolbox, you'll be able to see this component here and you can drag and drop and use it. Uh, and then the most important step here is you have to make sure that you go into your SXS starter folder and create a rendering. Here, what I have done is I copy pasted the rich text rendering uh, and then pasted here. The name is very important, as I mentioned. This is hello XMCRT. And then if I just go back, you can see this. So this is very important. This is how it connects. And then now my component is rendering. So here you can now start learning Next.js and do a lot of GraphQL stuff and then get your component ready. So that's the end-to-end process, how this works. Um, and then, yeah, I believe I covered everything for the demo. I'm just going through my slides and making sure that I have not missed anything. And the last and important thing is you'll be spending a lot of time with Docker, uh, right? So you can click on the containers. This is a Docker extension, which I strongly recommend, where it shows you all the running containers. So these are my running constant container. So let's say this is my XM Cloud CM instance, right? I can click on that and I can expand it. And this files, what is going to show the files which are there on that particular Docker instance. So I can investigate that, make sure that whatever I deployed is getting deployed, my configs are there. And if I'm, let's say, if I like to see my configs are not reflecting for any reason, I can go here and download that and view that. So it's very important. And then very important step is once you are done with your stuff, just make sure that you run the down.ps1. So now I'm shutting down my containers. So that's part of demo. While the containers are setting down, let's talk about a few other things. This document is recently released by Sitecore development or documentation team, which is getting started with XM Cloud. It has very step-by-step guide. I strongly recommend you to follow that. And then I think we are on time for questions.
Yeah, we have a query from Jitendra.
Mhm.
Is it possible to run an exam cloud instance without Docker?
XM Cloud instance without Docker in your local? No, there is no, unfortunately, there is no way. But as I mentioned, if you don't want to do any Sitecore specific things, when I say Sitecore specific things, like you don't want to run content editor and create template renderings, templates and everything in your local, then what you can do is you can leverage your dev instance, which is hosted on XM Cloud, and then connect it via the GraphQL endpoint.
Okay, we have one more question from, I hope Jitendra, that answered your query, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Welcome.
No problem. Yeah, we have another query from Chandan, which is says like how to manage multiple layouts, how to manage users on layout level and component level, and how to handle multi-list field in the component in Next.js app.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah, sorry, no problem. How to manage multiple layouts.
Multiple layouts. Can you expand that? Sorry, can you explain that question
Yeah,
a little bit more?
so even what I mean to say, let's see if we
Mm,
have number of layouts, right? The same
mm,
layouts need to be created in the Next.js app, right? So how
mm.
that mapping works, so that I want to understand. Means let's see, tomorrow I have a different layout some for some other template, right? So that layout need to be created in the Next.js app, right?
Okay. So if
Yeah.
I understand right, what you're saying is like your you're talking about the layout definition items. Let's say you have main layout and you have main two layout, right? That's what you are referring?
Uh, Yes, by default we have a layout on the home page, right? And the same
Mm,
mapping is done in the Next.js app, right?
mm,
So in the
mm,
Next.js app, you will see there is a layout file, right?
mm,
So tomorrow let's see if I create a different layout item, right? In
mm,
our site code. So the same
mm.
mapping has to be done in a Next.js app, right? If I want to
Yeah.
change the layout into a different structure. So how
Mhm.
that mapping works and how where to create and how that need to be done. So that
Sure.
was the first one.
Yeah, I think that again, I have not because usually we create only one layout. That's the standard thing we follow. We don't want to create multiple layouts, but
Let's say
you
we
would
have
basically
product page,
create.
let's say we have a product page and we have article page and we have a different structure for both the template. In that
Mhm.
case, we need to go with a different layout, right? And they may have a different CSS design, right? So we have to create a separate layout for both the page templates. And we need to load a separate CSS and something. So that differentiation has to be done on the layout level, right?
No, it's not required. If you want to do that, that's a one way of it, but that's not required. Basically, you create your uh, partial designs and page designs. You just need a one layout, and then you need to have different partial designs and page designs to achieve that, right? So it's not required. And then you should read more about Next.js component-based styling and scripting. Basically, you can have a component-based styling and scripting, which is only getting called for that particular component. In this example, your article page. But if I, let's say, in case you decide, no, no, I want to create a layout. Um, I have not done it as I mentioned, but my theory says like I'll spend some time looking into this and then try to uh, figure out how this works and then try to create the layout. But I don't have like mechanism I would create. But if you ask me, as working in Sitecore for this many years, I would avoid creating multiple layouts. I'll just create a one layout throughout the platform and then try to create multiple partial designs and page designs and then achieve the output.
Okay. And let's say if I want to load some CSS at the component level, right? So how we manage that CSS part, the assets inside the assets?
Um, yeah, I think there is a mechanism. I don't remember the top of my head. I'll see if I can find that article. There's an article which talks about it. There's a mechanism.
Okay, okay, I got your point. And so let's say in the case we have a multi-list field, so how in the component we can manage that? For the list text, we have a simple here.
Mhm,
Let's see if in our data source template we have a multi-list field, right? So how
mhm.
we are going to manage that in the component in the Next.js app? at the NTS in that file in the component file. Let's say you have an interface and you have mentioned that fields, right?
Hmm.
Something. So if you have multi-list field, in that case, how we are going to manage that?
Yeah, I think that's something I have to check. Don't have quick answer for that.
Okay, because for text, for string type, which text and single line text, we have a normal, right? Field
Yep,
and you
yep.
pass the string type.
Sure.
But I was facing a situation where we have a multi-list. So in that case,
Yeah.
how we are going to do that in a simple way? That I mean to say.
Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah, I need to look into that because there is some example I have seen, but yeah, I don't remember uh, top of my head. There should be here in SXS starter kit. But yeah, I need to check that.
Okay, no issue. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Yes, Hussein, you can go ahead now.
Oh, yes. Thank you. So, Kiran, I just had a quick question regarding if, for example, our organization is not like we don't have any organizations associated, for example, partner or something for the XM Cloud. Is there any way that we can get our hands dirty in like playing with this XM Cloud or something?
Sure. Yeah. So I think you can. I assume that you work for Sitecore partner, so you'll have a Sitecore partner account representative, so you can reach out to Sitecore partner channel, and they should be able to give you an access. This is
And
not
what
for
if,
client, right?
yeah, no, no, no. And what if the
Yeah.
company, for example, I'm working is not partnered with Sitecore, so there is no way that we can get our hands dirty in this.
Yeah, unfortunately, as far as I know, there is no way because still have to go
Hmm.
through partner channel and then they can get you uh,
Yeah,
an access.
yeah, yeah, thank you.
Sure, yeah, good question. We have 5 minutes left. Any more questions? And I cannot see the chat screen, unfortunately. Like I'm just trying to get my chat screen up, but
No,
are
no,
there any
no.
questions? Okay, perfect. Yeah, let me know if there are questions in chat.
Yeah, please utilize this 5 minutes to get your queries clarified by Kiran.
Uh, Yamini, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
Kiran, is it possible to utilize a layout service instead of a GraphQL in XM Cloud?
I think yes, you can do it. If I remember right, there is a configuration in the environment file where you can do that. But yeah, I think it is. The answer is yes.
And is there any, what what will be the best use case to use a layout service instead of a GraphQL?
Mm, I don't have answer for that, unfortunately. But yeah, I strongly recommend GraphQL because layout is uh, gives a lot of extra data. So yeah, I think. But here, in case you want, just to answer your first question, you can change this fetch with value. There are multiple values here. I don't remember the other value, but here you can modify and then you can use that.
Okay. And if I'm not wrong, GraphQL, the transfer the data over a browser, right?
GraphQL transfer the data over browser. I think it works behind the scenes, like
Okay.
on
I
the
mean,
Next.js
is
server
there
side.
any security concern related when we use a GraphQL? If we have a sensitive data in our output, is there any security concern over the graph using the GraphQL? Or is there any, if it is there any other mechanism to secure that response?
So you're talking about the public website, right? So
Yes,
public
yes.
website, all the content is public, right? So I don't see any challenge. Only make sure that your GraphQL configurations, like the endpoint security keys, are kind of
I'm
exposed
in
in the
the
code.
public website, but if there is any login available and if we have a user, something related to user thing,
Mhm,
there might be, I mean, the sensitive data may be there. So is there
mhm.
any risk or
No, I don't
anything
think
that?
so. Yeah, I don't see because I think I'm 99% confident that it works on the server side. Like it doesn't
Okay.
expose anything, so I don't see any problem.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, we have one more question from Shailesh. He's asking mainly to documentation to migrate from XP or XM to XM Cloud. Like good blogs and documentation available to migrate from XP or XM to XM Cloud.
Um, I think from horizontal point of view, we have the XM Cloud playbook. So search for that, you'll find it. And I contributed to that, so at least I know that's a good source. And then Sitecore developer site also has a lot of information about it. And then look into the SUGHYD 2023 session. I forgot the title of the session, but there is a session about XP to XM Cloud. It's very detailed and very nice. I like that. So three sources: XM Cloud Playbook for by which is a PDF, 7-8 page PDF, step-by-step guide by horizontal. So you can look into that. The second source is developer sitecore.net. Just sitecore.com and go to there, and then you'll find the XP to XM Cloud. Even there is a migration tool by Sitecore, so you'll find the information there. And the third source is SUGHYD 2023, not 2024. Uh, Make sure that you look into 2023 playlist of SUGHYD 2023 Europe, not North America or India. SUGHYD Europe, you'll find a session where the XP to XM Cloud migration, and that video is very nice. It provides you all the things which you need to know. And I also talked about it in the last uh, session. It's about let me see if I can find that. In my last session, I also talked about few things which you need to remember when you migrate. I'm just trying to find one resource I had. I'm looking at my other screen and trying to find that. XM Cloud. Yeah, I think, yeah, these are the resources. Not finding that particular piece here. Any more questions?
Um, any more questions? Okay, I think we are good. Thank you so much, Kiran. It was very valuable session, and we did learn so many like new things and understanding the old things as well in a new perspective. So thank you so much for the session. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome. Thanks everyone for joining. Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for the session. It was really great session. Kiran. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.